It was during the reign of King Henry VIII. One of the most unusual jobs in history was created, the Groom of the Stool. So you would think a job like this would have been given to the lowest of the low in society? Actually, it was quite the opposite. Surprisingly, it was the sons of noblemen or members of the gentry that were usually awarded the job with very high payment. Many occupations that were commonplace in the past no longer exist on resumes today. Some disappeared due to advancing technology, while others were phased out due to improved labor laws. In this video, we will explore jobs that have gone the way of the dinosaurs. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. But how many steps is 1,000 miles anyway? You could always ask a Bimetist. This was a specialist who was trained to measure distances by counting steps. They could measure hundreds of miles with more than 95% accuracy. They would often publish their calculations in book which listed distances between well-known points as well as reports of empirical customs and natural findings. Also known as body snatchers, resurrectionists were in high demand up until the 20th century. Back then, when the medical students needed deceased bodies for practicing surgery, resurrectionists helped them out. How? Cadavers from legal means were rare and difficult to obtain. So universities had to resort to other means to produce cadavers for their students. For this job, resurrectionists were hired by anatomists to exhume bodies of the recently dead and deliver them to universities for research and study. While it was not an official occupation, it was still quite popular. During the Industrial Revolution, people didn't have alarm clocks. And those living in cities most certainly did not have a rooster crowing to announce a new morning. Then how did people get up for work? Easy. They hired a knocker-upper. Knocker-uppers were people whose sole occupation was to wake people up from sleep for their work. Even though mechanical alarm clocks were invented in the late 18th century, they weren't affordable for the common man. So the factory employees used to heavily rely on these people to wake them up for work by either tapping on the windows with a long stick or simply by throwing peas or pebbles at the windows at an appointed time. You must be wondering, but who woke the knocker-uppers? Well, they were night owls and slept during the day instead. Knocker-uppers were mostly found in Britain and Ireland, but as alarm clocks became more accessible, the job was eventually put on permanent snooze. It's hard to believe that this was a job for some people back in the days. The people who used to catch rats were known as ratners. In the Victorian era, ratners would capture and sell rats to pubs where they were eaten by dogs, which served as entertainment for pub goers. And when the infamous Black Plague spread out, the practice came in handy to minimize the spread of the disease. Everybody knows how the healthcare industry relied on leeches for many decades to treat patients. But have you ever wondered where those leeches came from? Somebody had to gather them. A leech collector was responsible for retrieving the blood-sucking worms from their natural habitat for doctors to use. Individuals with this job would use the legs of animals or their own legs to lure leeches from creeks and rivers. Unfortunately, the use of their body as bait often led to infections and other bodily harm, and the profession has since died out. In the 16th and 17th century, when organized sewage systems were still a dream, a massive amount of human waste from London ended up in the River Thames. That, accompanied by the city's general uncleanliness, made London a foul-smelling place to be in. Royal and upstanding households could employ a solution to this in the form of herbstrewers. Herbstrewers wandered about their employees' homes and outdoors as they walked, distributing pleasant-smelling herbs to mask those bad odors. However, when sewage systems became more advanced and perfumes were invented, the job was no longer needed. One of the earliest jobs to be eaten alive by automation is the pin sitter. This job entailed manually setting up bowling pins every time customers would finish their round. With the advent of the automated mechanical device, this position became superfluous and eventually obsolete. Unlike enjoying a bit of scrolling through social media or listening to podcasts or radios on the job, people working in factories in the early 19th century had to devise another source of entertainment. Factories would hire lectors to read aloud newspapers or books on site to keep workers entertained. The lector would usually sit or stand on an elevated surface so that the entire factory would be able to hear. I honestly can't see how that was entertaining, as it seems pretty distracting to me. What do you think about this? Let me know by leaving a comment. You might not find job listing for toad doctors today, but back in the 17th century, the sick in England regularly relied on this folk magic. Doctors and medical researchers believed that toads had healing properties, and they started to use toads in the practice of medicine. Toad doctors would practice a medicinal folk magic in Western England until the end of 19th century. Patients with scrofula were said to be cured after wearing a toad, either living or dead, in a muslin bag around their neck. Now it's pretty clear why this bizarre job doesn't exist anymore. It was during the reign of King Henry VIII, one of the most unusual jobs in history was created: the Groom of the Stool. This job would require the Groom of the Stool to undress the king and wait for the king to be finished with his bathroom business. Then he would wipe the king's behind using cotton and water. Sometimes the excrement was taken away to be inspected by doctors to make sure the king is healthy. So you would think a job like this would have been given to the lowest of the low in society? Actually, it was quite the opposite. Surprisingly, it was the sons of noblemen or members of the gentry that were usually awarded the job with very high payment. It's worth remembering that during this period of history, people were extremely excited to be connected to royalty in any way possible. Just being near the king's court elevated your status in society. Quite amazingly, the role of Groom of the Stool carried on all the way until 1901, when King Edward VII decided to abolish it. That's all for today's video. Let me know in the comment section which of these jobs you would have loved to do and which job you hated most. Thanks for watching this video. Keep watching and keep supporting.